Hey, what's up? Happy New Year. Sorry for the echo, it is only for the intro. This episode of Metric is about the Nintendo Switch and its totally bitchin' modular design. I asked Chad Haefele and Tim Broadwater, who are two Metric alums and professional UX dudes, and I just love to listen to them talk. I asked them to join me to conjecture about the user experience of the Nintendo Switch, the nostalgia market, and stuff like that. Real quick, do me a solid. Please tell two friends about this podcast. And take a second to rate or recommend it in either iTunes or Overcast or wherever. If you think it's pretty good, help bring Metric to the attention of maybe some of the bigger UXy players in this space. You know their Twitter handles. I would really appreciate it. Alrighty, let's get to it. This week we've got two Metric podcast alums, Tim Broadwater and Chad Haefele. Welcome, guys.
Thanks. Good to be back.
So we've been meaning to make this episode happen for a few weeks, but I think we were all impressed, not just as gamers, but as user experience people back during the announcement of the Nintendo Switch. So I thought we'd just Avengers Assemble for half an hour and just talk about it.
So have either of you pre-ordered it?
I want to pre-order it.
I guess if the opportunity arose, yeah.
Especially since they just announced that, Final Fantasy 15 is going to be coming out onto it, which takes, I think, all your fans back to Nintendo from when they left Nintendo for PlayStation.
That's probably the last time I seriously played Nintendo. That's a pretty good point. Mm-hmm. Return.
Are either of you Wii U owners for comparison points?
I guess the last Nintendo console I had was the N64.
Yeah, I've owned every Nintendo system except the N64.
I'm the exact same way. I skipped that one somehow.
I'm glad, because most people said it's awesome, and I'm like, the space controllers that were so weird, and I wasn't really impressed with the graphics. Mm-hmm. I waited out on that one. But currently I do have a Wii U, and I have the new 3DS XL with the two joysticks, and so, yeah, those are pretty much what I play on the most, and I do a little bit of Steam gaming on PC.
I have to admit, my Wii U is the console that collects the most dust at the moment. I mean, they all collect dust. I haven't been playing as much as I used to, but the Wii U is the one you could maybe grow something in.
Yeah, Wii U is definitely, I think, it is like one game comes out on it, I think, every season or maybe every 6 months that you just got to get your hands on and play. And then you're kind of, wait for a bit,
Yeah.
So I think for like the wild success of the original Wii, for all of its record-busting sales, I think incorrectly it also signaled sort of like a change in brand for Nintendo that kind of created this division between the hardcore gamers, the PlayStation and Xbox, and the PC gamers, and like the Nintendo brand. I have to admit that I had this bias that until the Nintendo Switch, I don't even know what I'm trying to say. The Nintendo Switch announcement really intrigued me, and for the first time in, however long it's been, I was like, I'm going to pick this up. This seems awesome. It seems like a brand shift. The commercial had no children in it, right? It wasn't billed as like a family console. Certainly like a cooperative and social console. But it wasn't like, hey, we're all in the living room with our waggle remotes.
I think there's a law there that I think, at least my perception is that there was a law in regards to social gaming, right? And so when I grew up and when I was in middle school and high school, like going over to a friend's house and playing fighting games together and like Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter or playing Mario games or anything like that, that was like couch cooperation, right? And so then what happened is things started to move to like an online game format. Nintendo was very nerfed. I mean, you had to know someone in the real world, and you had to have their friend code. And then
friend codes. Oh man.
Oh yeah, and then you had to add theirs, and they had to add yours, and then it would link up, and then that's still not even having a mechanism for you to say like, well, can we get on and play together at a certain time? And I think Xbox and PlayStation has done this fantastic job about just like, oh, you can just jump into a game, and if you like someone, friend them, and you can talk to them, and you can see when they're on, and it's much more organic. It's much more how online gaming works.
And Xbox Live is, what, more than a decade old now?
Maybe it wasn't like launch, but it's super early, and it certainly
was close to
predated
it,
others. I remember at the time, I think Parallel, that was Medal of Honor Allied Assault years for me, and that was the game that I was majorly playing on PC, which, again, the early implications of at least all online multiplayer were huge. It had been a thing for a long time on the PC, but I think in hindsight, like, I spent a lot of my high school and early college years behind a screen with some headphones on, and it wasn't that I was like locked away hammering furiously at some leaderboard, but it was a social event. We had Medal of Honor Allied Assault was a first-person shooter, and so we had a clan and we had tournaments, and it was a sport, and there were friends there, right?
The user experience is different, and I think the reason why is because you're connecting to like 20 people online in different locations and whatever, and that's a great experience for that type of game. And I can tell you, like, Nintendo has always kept it central to, like, well, you got 4 people over, you got 6 people over, and they're playing a party game together, or they're all playing in the same living room. And I can tell you from, like, I'm a huge gamer. I go to PAX as much as possible, the Penny Arcade Expo. And I don't know that many people where it's like, let's have 6 people over to play Xbox. I don't know if that happens as much as it does for, like, Nintendo.
I don't think so.
And I think what's interesting about this branding that you're talking about is, like, the experience looks amazing. It's like I can take it with me. I can project it to a large screen at any time. I can just break apart pieces of it and have 4 people play or 2 people play, and it just seems more organic with real life. And what's exciting about it to me is when I look at that commercial, you're not alone at home, like just with your headset on. The first guy was but then it actually broke up and then went all over the world.
So I want to just take a second, and for those listeners who aren't gamers, like, we should maybe describe kind of like this modular design that really is pretty unique. Basically, what you see in the commercial, anyway, and is basically this dude with like a classic like wired or wireless controller on a couch, and then something happens, and he's like, "Oh man, I have to get up. I have to go do something." So he walks up to his Nintendo Switch, and he just pops out of its container.
I think he goes out
and he attaches like little handles to it, or what? Yeah, that's what he does. Yeah, he continues his game. It's the same game. It's not a diminished game. It's like he just picks up his game, and now it's no longer on the flat screen, but it's on this tablet with 2 little detachable joycons, these joystick, removable, interoperable, interesting looking remotes. One person will take one of the Joy-Cons. They'll kind of like turn them on their side and play them like old school Nintendo controllers on the same little small screen. What it suggests is this omni-channel experience where you're popping between not just screens but entirely different contexts, some social, some solo. I think it might be like the first time you've seen that.
And I've seen attempts at, I think we've all seen attempts at that kind of omnipresent play before. Like if you have a PlayStation 4 and a PlayStation Vita, you can play PS4 games on the Vita. And I think Microsoft has done something similar where you can play Xbox One games on your PC. But that's like Nintendo's taking it a step further, where you can take the whole thing with you out of the house. Like with the Vita, you still have to be within range to connect your PS4 at home, essentially, but in another room. Whereas the Switch lets you take the whole thing on the go.
I will say it first and foremost, and I wrote a post about this on my website, but it's kind of, I am a Nintendo fanboy. I bought into the brand loyalty a while ago, and it's just, I've found out, their user experience, the play style. I think the products they deliver are very polished. I've never picked up, the specific games that I want to play. I've never had a bad experience, and when I see, that they're taking this modular piece and then taking it to another person because there's a place where they play like an NBA Jams kind of game where they take two screens and put them back to back and they wirelessly sync to each other. Then they break off 4 controllers and they all start playing. That's amazing to me. That's I think that's probably the essence of great product design. That's the essence of just a great designed artifact. And I think that's every input device that I think Nintendo has had, which if it's like a light zapper or the power pad or the power glove, it's so rad. Or all the way to the Wii remote and even the Wii U. We're using the first tablet kind of in games. I think they're all, I don't see them as gimmicky. I see them as these great interaction kind of pieces that work really well.
Yeah, I have to agree. I don't think I've ever played a first-party Nintendo game that left me disappointed. I mean, some of the third-party stuff is a bit of a crapshoot, but even on the Wii U, they're perhaps the least successful console. Every Mario Kart, Smash Brothers, all the big franchises they've got going, they treat them really, really well, no matter what they do. And I'm excited to see what the new capabilities of the Switch let them tap into.
Yeah, I was actually I travel a lot for work, and I've been going through. I got a subscription to Audible.com, and I've been polishing off all the UX books that I've wanted to read for a long time, and so.
Tim, real quick, would you recommend an Audible.com book that you've recently read that maybe our listeners could use a wonderful link for a free 30-day trial, audibletrial.com/metric to get their free book?
Yeah, no, I would say probably the best one that you can check out right now is if you haven't read it, you need to read Hooked. Hooked is how to build habit-forming products and designs. It's fantastic. And the other one is Sprint, which is kind of how to...
I love that book.
Yeah, Sprint, they're both amazing books. If they're kind of I would say, the 21st century. Here in 2016, if you're wondering what books need to make up your UX kind of library, I would say Hooked, I would say Sprint, and I would even say No UX. Those 3 books are amazing. But yeah, so not to be a shameless plug for Audible, but they actually had a reduced price book where you could go back and you could read Don Norman's The Design of Everyday Things, and I think in that he kind of talks about products of the Nielsen Norman group. Don Norman is more the object oriented physical kind of interacted, where the other was more dealing with interfaces, I think, in HCI, but. When he's describing these objects that make people really happy to use them, objects that when people look at them, they can see how they work visibly and that they give the appropriate feedback and they constrain you in ways so you can't use them in ways that are counterintuitive or don't work. And they map to where, if I move right, it moves right, and if I push forward, it moves forward. Those kind of experiences that make objects, very easy to pick up and to use and to make this kind of return enjoyment. I think of the light zapper, the power glove. I think of the Wii remote, and I probably looking towards this Nintendo Switch. It looks like this is just going to be so much fun, and I could tell from just watching a 3-minute commercial on it how to use it.
What do you think of the potential for? Sticking with that physical object metaphor, Nintendo hasn't said they're doing this, but they obviously could make different joycons that go on each side with different inputs and controls and things like that. I've seen some fan-made concept art for some of that stuff where, you might make one that looks like a fishing reel. If you think back to the days of the Wii, there were all these weird little plastic things that you could fit the Wiimote inside that would make it do different things, and they, succeeded and failed to varying degrees. But I'm wondering if that might be more successful, being more integrated into the experience in this way, where you can actually attach and detach different control units as needed for different games.
I think, there's definitely... I think there's some already out there, actually. So if you look at... I think one is the Mighty Action X, is I'm thinking the product that's right, where it's actually this drawing, shooting kind of thing. It actually puts on a kid's kind of handle to it and a place to hold other... drawing pins, and so I think it's you could look for it. I think if you just Google search Nintendo
Wow.
Switch add-ons, like developers are already kind of, I think,
That's
going
crazy.
with it. And I
For
think
a
some of
console
them will
that we know
probably-
almost nothing about yet.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, so they've obviously released like developer stuff to some degree.
This creates an additional like third party or secondary like collectible market, and it's something that Nintendo's been doing to success with Amiibo and these things for a long time, like special cases. They've really been able to appeal to that part of like the gamer culture as well. So their first party games tend to be excellent. Their hardware tends to be really good and innovative, and they also kind of like feed our need to collect and modify and expand and tinker.
I was going to say, I think Nintendo has done a better job of tapping into the physicality of console games than either the Xbox or the PlayStation 4 has. With like the Amiibos you mentioned, like these are physical things. They're not digital downloadable titles that the Xbox and PlayStation are pushing. And if Nintendo, again, like we're totally theorizing that they're going to do extensive different controller Joy-Con things, but if they do go that route, then like the physicality of it becomes even more important. Like, would you even be able to download a game if you don't have the physical controller required for it?
Interesting.
And then the whole idea that you're picking up the whole console and taking it with you, like it feels like it exists in your physical space much more to me than either of the other major consoles do right now.
Yeah, I think that what I love about Nintendo as opposed to, and I think it's just the nature of the company and it's the nature of it being rooted primarily in Japan. I love that they kind of reference themselves as they go forward. And so the light zappers in other games, I think it's in like Duck Hunt is in Super Smash Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the fact that they have Rob the Robot, which, was this thing that came out for the NES, Robotic Operating Buddy, and it was this robot that could pick up like gyromite spheres and drop it on little spin tiles to help play. So you're like, if you were home alone and you wanted an electric buddy to play with, you had one. And then that's now an Amiibo as well. And so I think one of the positive things, like you said, Chad, is that people associate this physicality with it, and that when they think back, they have like the whole plethora of like power pads and turbos and gloves and zappers and like being one of the first consoles that you could actually take the Game Boy and plug it into the console system, I think is just it's just amazing. It's just kind of groundbreaking in my opinion.
Yeah, they definitely have that history and know how to tap into it without it feeling too shameless or blatant marketing.
Yeah, I'm interested to see. I'm scheduled to go to PAX this spring.
Jealous.
So I got, because the tickets sell out in like 5 seconds.
Yeah.
I mean, like the first 5 minutes. And so you have to kind of piece together some tickets from the other days. And like within 15 minutes, like one of the days sells out. But it's interesting because I went like 3 years ago, and then I didn't go for 2 years, and I went this year. And what I saw change dramatically is that from the developer standpoint, they don't care. Developers don't care about Nintendo or Sony or not really Xbox. I mean, they develop Steam games first, and then the games are developed on a PC kind of environment, and then they're rolled out to whatever platforms they think they'll do well in. And so there's a huge category of games now that you can just get on PC. But one of the other things that I thought was amazing is that there was 4 years ago, there was maybe one tournament going on where people could go in, and it was the new Mortal Kombat at that time, and they had 100 people sign up for the tournament, and you could just had crowds upon crowds of people watching them play at the Penny Arcade Expo in Boston. And then they had announcers for the game, like as people are playing. And so since then, 4 years later to this year, 2016, the gaming culture has changed so much that YouTube gaming commentators are now huge online. And then there was like 20 games there that had commentators and this. And so what I really thought was exciting is in this Nintendo Switch commercial, at the very last part of the commercial, showed them going to like convention playoffs, a team of 5 versus a team of 5 playing Splatoon. And so I just think with their marketing, they really tapped into like what the current gaming culture is right now, which is exciting.
So we keep talking about that awesome marketing video that they had. Are either of you nervous that that's going to be just marketing and not going to live up to it? I keep thinking of the initial video that promoted Google Glass when it was going to be a thing, and like that video was amazing, and then Google Glass came out and was not that device as depicted in the video at all.
Well, and then also I think Google Pixel just came out, like the phone. They've been doing like a kick butt market right now, but then I think within like a couple weeks, OnePlus One announced their OnePlus 3 phone, and it completely blows it out of the water and is half the cost. So it's a concern, I definitely think, because now that this is like the gauntlet has been thrown down, I'm very curious to see what PlayStation and Xbox are going to, how they're responding to it.
I think as a non-customer of Nintendo, I'm not actually worried. I think the history of Nintendo marketing has actually demonstrated the capability of their products in a realistic way. The Wii behaved as the Wii was presented to behave in the commercials, the Wii U as well. What really kind of like sunk the Wii U was maybe like lack of like third-party developer support and some things like that, and maybe some, I don't know, over-optimism and how it would sell. But I think, in a way, Nintendo is not dissimilar from Apple in that, at least in terms of like hardware and their first-party product, they tend not to release something until it's right. There's always exceptions, but I actually look at like kind of like the vague history of this company, and then look at the Nintendo Switch, and I feel actually pretty optimistic. I don't think it oversold itself.
I think there's probably two things about what you just said. One is it's funny enough, there is kind of a hype and miscommunication, or misperception is a better word, because the Wii U actually had like every third-party game, pretty much, but they came out delayed. They weren't released at the same time as like Batman: Arkham Asylum or all of the Call of Duties and like any of those type of games. Those all actually came out, but they just weren't. They came out later. It took some time to return them, and then
and not only late, but they also didn't really take advantage of the unique capabilities of the Wii U at all.
Right, they were ports, and they were demonstrative that that for whatever reason that the third parties didn't prioritize that hardware.
Now some of them did. Some of them who took the extra time, like Batman was a fantastic one.
Yeah, so I heard it was good,
and that it really used the tablet in a creative kind of way, and. But the other piece is that for all the people who left, who remember Nintendo as this nostalgic, like, it was fantastic, and then they, maybe because of Final Fantasy or whatever, they left and went to PlayStation or Xbox. I mean, Nintendo just dropped their new hotness, which is this classic, which you can't even get because it's sold out at every store, and it has like 30 of their most popular games on it, and it's just like a plug and play that's a little Nintendo that fits in your back of your hand, and so the people who want the nostalgia gaming will totally get that, and it's only $50, and that's like considered like one of the hottest shopping items this Christmas, because people bought them up, scooped them up, and now are reselling them for thousands of dollars on eBay.
And that highlights how Nintendo's mastered the art of getting me to buy the same game over and over again. I think I've probably bought Super Mario Brothers 3 5 or 6 times at this point for different consoles generations.
Yeah, I mean, that's...
And gladly. I'm not complaining. I'm happy to buy it.
Yeah, I don't think the perfect like console exists where people want, I want total backwards compatibility, and I want total forwards capability and expansion, and I want mobile, and it just doesn't exist. But what excites me about what they're talking about right now with Modern Warfare and then Kingdom Hearts and Metal Gear 5 and Final Fantasy all being on Nintendo Switch, and that they're kind of poking fun at like, well, whatever our friend system ends up being like on the Nintendo Switch, it won't be able to be hacked. And so that's kind of, we haven't seen it yet, of course.
That's a bold claim to make.
Exactly. It is.
Are they making that claim because they're using cartridges instead of discs?
Well, so I think they're still going to be doing. So Nintendo discontinued, their yearly platinum and gold member accounts where you could purchases and earn things and do surveys and stuff. And so that they got rid of that, and then I think they've mentioned about moving completely to digital as possible. But if you look, there's some type of cartridge, your memory card, that's being loaded into it, but we don't know exactly what that is. I think there's always going to be a person who wants to go out and physically buy the game, and you can't ever eliminate that capability,
But from a practical standpoint, you couldn't really do a portable console like this with optical media. So if there's any physical copies of the games at all, I think it's going to have to be cartridges.
I know that there have been a few people who have kind of balked at the idea of cartridge, but Nintendo's been doing the cartridge. I mean, they have I think their own factories. They're in the cartridge optimization and perfection business at this point. I think one of the other things also is that the cartridge is faster. They're prioritizing performance of the device. Turn on, get the game, bulge through those loading screens. They're appealing to that point of need it now, much better than disc, and probably because the Switch itself might not have the hard drive space to download 60, 70 gigabyte games, which would help with those load screens. So I think the cartridge is a faster medium that's been otherwise abandoned. But
I think the other piece is too is that everyone's expecting, and I certainly at some point with and I will say I'm a Nintendo fanboy, but with the insane graphics, when you get to the level of spec mapping and bit mapping everything to where you actually have physical textures in the 3D model that refract light, and you get this amazing graphics. It's just at some point you're I kind of just want to play the game. And so I play tons of games on my 3DS. It has horrible graphic resolution, I play games on my Android phone, and so to some degree, if what they have to serve up works on a 1080 HD screen, but then also works on their small screen, I'm fine with it. And I think a lot of people will be fine with it too. I don't know how many total hardcore graphic people are out there. I think there's always that stereotype for PlayStation or Xbox people, but I don't know if it is. I think it is a stereotype to where the graphics have to be super specularity and have total HD and have bump mapping and all this. I don't know if that's what the percentage of gamer that is.
I suspect it's a vocal minority, but the one upshot of specs is that they are unlike subjective reviews. Specs are, you are able to objectively compare them against a competitor, right? So you can say the Xbox or the PS4 is better than the Xbox because of these hardware numbers, right? Whereas side by side, you'd have to be pretty picky to discern. I think there is some market advantage. To me, it looks strategically the target audience is, yes, the Nintendo customer. More than that, they're looking to fill a gap that Xbox lacks and the PlayStation isn't supporting as well. There appears to be a market that Nintendo is optimized for taking.
And Tim, I want to step back to something you said a minute ago. I think you mentioned, it'll be interesting to see them make games that will work both on a giant 1080p screen and on the mobile device. I'm really excited to see how they solve those design challenges. Will the game change its interface between the two different screens? Will we see an equivalent of responsive design for games? It'll be really interesting to see how they tackle that, because interface elements that work really well in one context, the lean back versus the up close, are going to be totally different.
Is there any indicator how that works?
Basically, they have the game system is the thing you carry around with you, which is the screen, and then the dock is a charger as well as what sends it to the large screen. And so, no, I don't. The beautiful thing about this is it's all conjecture at this point. We have no idea.
we have 3 minutes of marketing footage that we're basing this on.
Yes, 3 minutes of marketing footage, and we have no specs. And people want specs, right? We live in a very spec-driven and tech culture. I mean, between what type of phones that people want. People are very brandist, but if the specs go one specific way to such a degree, they will abandon a brand because it's like not making sense anymore for me to get like a Samsung or for me to have an Apple or an Android product anymore. And so until they come out with some specs, it's kind of all up in the air about how it's all going to work.
I think there's a lot of things that we could talk about. I love the ideas about revisiting this kind of like nostalgia market. We're pushing our time though. I wonder if either of you have any kind of summarizing like takeaways. Anything you want to leave off with?
My takeaway, I think, mostly is I'm just excited to see something different come out in the console gaming area. I mean, I love my Xbox, I love my PlayStation, but they're in a lot of ways functionally equivalent to each other.
A coworker that I have actually turned me on to a great UX article over the summer, and it's on a list apart, and it's called Object-Oriented UX. I know it's a good read if you ever check it out, but it's basically it's interesting because I see many parallels to what's going on with the Nintendo Switch to kind of object-oriented user experience. And so serving up different kind of, like you're saying, modular things that can adjust or interrelate to each other, but it fits in organically and very it's versatile with the human experience. So being able to take it to walk your dog or sit on your couch or take it to a friend's party or have it with you at the airport to play for a second or doing something at a coffee shop, that's what's really appealing to me. And like I'm beyond the days of my youth where I'm going to pack up my PlayStation, my Wii U, or my Xbox and take it somewhere, And so I think the exciting thing for me is kind of that it is versatile and that it can be ported around. And it seems like there's it has a bunch of very cool options that kind of interwork with each other, and how the experience can change and map with itself and the users, or with itself, its other parts, and multiple users, is very object-oriented kind of like user experience, to where it can constantly change and it can work for you how it works best for you,
Yeah, I think they're putting an emphasis on the experience being modular. And I mean, obviously the controller hardware is modular also, but the dock is just a dock. It doesn't add extra processing power or anything like that to it. Whereas I think a lot of the older, partially failed stuff that you were talking about, Michael, are attempted to do more with the hardware as modularity. And I think the Switch is maybe focusing more on the modular experience, which might really work for them.
Chad, you talk a little bit about Gamification Unlocked.
Yeah, so my co-host Brandon and I have a podcast. We're about 14 or 15 episodes in now, Gamification Unlocked. We're at unlockinggames.com. And I have background in user experience. Brandon has a background in corporate training and instructional design. So every week we talk about a different gaming-related topic through one or both of those lenses. I think our latest one we wrapped up talking about adventure games and discovery learning and the terrible, terrible things that King's Quest used to make us do.
I was at first it's a super podcast. I think I told you when you announced the first episode, I was really kind of sad. I didn't think about it first.
I got dibs.
It's really appealing. I was thinking about during your last episode on Xbox Gold, one of the free games last month, which would have been October, was the remastered version of The Secret of Monkey Island. And
I remember that. That was a great podcast that you had.
It's this notion of it's this old school adventure game that is relatively straightforward, and I think maybe because I have 20 or 30 years of experience playing these kind of old school adventure games, but I find myself clicking around on the screen because I have to stomp on a board to knock a fish off the plank or something, and it's just kind of shit that is you would never, without clicking aimlessly, you would never discover. Chad, in the podcast you described running around in Wolfenstein, trying to just like hitting B to see if you can open to find secret passages in the wall, and so that you would do that in literally like every room on every level of Wolfenstein.
Yeah, I would just hug every wall, walk around the outline of every level, find all the secret loot.
It's a super fun topic. And I totally recommend like folks go out there and like listen to it and rate it positively. And
yes,
check it out.
please.
And I can't believe it's been like 15 episodes. That
Yeah,
seems,
me neither.
Yeah, it's I've listened to the both, Metric and yours. They're both great podcasts. I would
Thank you.
highly recommend anyone listening to.
Yeah,
And for Tim, I'm just gonna like plug some of the stuff. So like you were like earlier in this episode, you were talking about interaction model artifacts, and you have this really great. I've never seen this before. You have this really great. I'm gonna link to it in the show notes. This really great remediation toolkit website that is the nice old school pixelated design. But it's an introduction to like remediation as like a design technique or a design pattern, and it just walks you through like all the different examples and little tools that you can use. And then of course you have this old article from 2014 with gems. I sort of like you talked about it, but I had never seen this Nintendo robot thing. This is crazy.
Rob the Robot.
One of the great regrets of my childhood is that I did not own one.
It's fantastic, and I think if you find them in your local vintage game stores, they're super expensive now. So, but I don't have really. I feel like I need to start a podcast now or something, but I don't really have. I don't really have anything to plug, but I have some writing and stuff. Like I do a bunch of disparate projects that are all kind of shared on my website, timbroadwater.com. So feel free to check it out if you want.
All right, guys. Well, have a good night. Thank you so much for making the time to come and talk games.
Yeah, it was fun. I got to go wait in line for my Switch now.
Yes.
Thanks, guys.